We are done with our presentation. But we still have a little time for some questions. If anybody wants to ask a question, please either raise your hand and we'll let you speak, or just write your question in the chat and we'll take it as soon as possible. Okay, I see Doctor this time, Mr. Kerry has raised her hand. So please.
Thank you very much. Thank you for our presentation. Very interesting. I'm going to start first with Dr. Misha and Mino with one question, and then if there is other time, I'm going to ask other questions. Could you please tell why Shias have not yet presented any protocol of agreement to the Italian Interior Minister? Thank you.
Okay, should I answer? Okay. Thank you. The issue with Shias in Italy is that, as I mentioned in my presentation, we have two main groups. One of them are converts. The other is the so-called, I call them Shia-borns. The problem with Shia-borns is that they are not familiar with bureaucratic know-how, and they are not any familiarity with the complications and the issues, the strategies that they should adopt to actually dialogue with the Italian authority. Actually, while I was conducting interview with them, none of them know what the intesa or bilateral agreement was. And while I can remember that when I asked them, have you ever thought about presenting a protocol of agreement to the Italian Interior Minister? They did not know even what we were talking about. And instead I was asking the same question to converts told me that, I mean, the organizers of the Imam Mahdi Center in Rome, which is governed by converts, they said that they have other priorities, and actually they preferred to give their energy, their time, their money to the organization of the Shia community, and to enhance the inter-religious relation of Shias, instead of dedicating time and money to their relation with Italian authorities. In this regard, there is also another problem here, and the issue is that converts actually in Italy, given that they actually share some political stance and political position of the Iranian political system, and naturally, obviously, issues like Palestinian cause, and also the Israel and the USA would come in this debate, and it is somehow obstacle their relation with the Italian authority, because, as we know, Italy is a member and an ally of the USA in the NATO, and in this relation of converse with the sympathy, actually the relationship that they have with the Iranian state somehow obstacle their relationship with Italian authorities.
So, right, if nobody has questions, maybe I can take advantage of this privilege of having been the moderator of such an interesting panel and ask a few questions to our speakers myself. So first question is to Minu, and it has to do with, we have seen how, somewhat there are a number of steps. So establishing your religion as a recognized religion here in Italy, and being able to create your spaces for practicing it is a process that has a number of steps. And but we do have a large mosque here here in Rome. So my question, and maybe you can tell us how the how it came to be, and perhaps it can give us a perspective of all the steps that need to be taken in order to establish your religion and getting a place to practice your religion here here in Italy. Then I have another question that perhaps applies to both Minu and Marius, which has to do with identities. Okay, multiple identities. We have been talking about communities that are somewhat have a presence out of their more traditional environment. Then this leads to a number of issues related to balancing different identities. So this is typical of any individual, but this is particularly important with migrants or second generation individuals, people who have been born as the son of immigrants. So different perceptions of yourself, different identities, religious, maybe national, different ways to socialize with the environment you are in. And I guess also a way to show this kind of complicated identities is to think about the perspective of Shias in Europe on events that dominate the news about the Middle East. So if you have a take of it, if you have explored this kind of aspect of different identities and or different perspective of pieces of reactions to current affairs, that would be a very interesting perhaps field to explore. Then there is another question has about how do these communities lobby somewhat, how they organize and try to somewhat further their interests with local authorities. This is perhaps, I don't know whether you have explored this side of the aspect of being having a religious minority in a different in a Western country. Then there is a question for Gyat about the Yazidis. We have seen how this small community has turned out to be very vulnerable to the events that have unfolded in Iraq and the Middle East recently. And we've also seen how smaller communities, vulnerable communities, need some kind to find some kind of protection from. So they need to somewhat band with other actors that can provide this kind of protection. We have seen in particular Iran, as you told, has been particularly active in, especially during the phase of ISIS expansion. Now, my question is this kind of increased interest in the fate of the Yazidis genuine, generally for the sake of religious tolerance, or what is the balance with other aspects, other maybe political goals or national goals for as far as Iran or other foreign governments are concerned? And my final question to Mina is, we have this perspective on Shia status in the West. Now, my question is, since Iran is so important in the Western perception of the Shia world, what is the space that is dedicated to the wider Shia community in Western studies of the Shia world? So these are my questions, and hope they help somewhat, and I look forward to hearing your answers.
So I don't know if I should start, given that your first question regarded my presentation now. Am I right?
Yeah, that would be.
Yeah. Okay, you were talking about the mosque, the biggest, I think it should be the biggest or the most beautiful mosque that we have in Europe, the mosque that is present in Rome. And actually it is the fruit of an economic boom after the Six-Day War between Arab countries and Israel in 60s. That, as you know, after that, there was a sanction regarding the petroleum, that Arab countries stopped selling petroleum to European countries. And you know that as a result of that decision, some sort of crisis happened in Europe, and Italy was not an exception to that economic crisis. And as a result, you know that Saudi Arabia had a very strong saying in that situation, and actually took advantage of that situation, and actually used that situation to build that huge and beautiful mosque in Rome. It was an experience that did not repeat anymore in the story of Italy. And you know that we do not have other, actually we have in Italy, as I said, 6 Sunni mosques, and but the only mosque that is considered by the Italian authority as a religious entity is this mosque, the mosque that we have in Rome. And other so-called mosques have minarets and have the structure, the external structure of mosque, but they are not considered mosque by the Italian authorities. And the other prayer halls, as I said, do not have even the external structure of the mosque. So it is, I think I have answered your question, I suppose. And the other issue regarding your second question, I'm not sure if I've understood it well, but as I understood it, the absence in Italy, the absence of powerful political representatives of other countries, I mean the other nationalities that I mentioned, namely Pakistanis, Lebanese, and Lebanese and Afghans in Italy. As a result, the absence of those powerful political representatives has given a possibility to the Iranian political representatives in Italy to have a very strong impact on Shia communities here. As a result, the position of Shias regarding the issues in the Middle East are very aligned with the political position of Iran, for instance, and especially in the case of converts, because as far as I noticed in my study, converts currently in in Italy, are very near to the political position of Iran. So, and they are the only groups that, who publish and divulgate Shi'ism in Italy, and the only knowledge that we have among Italians regarding Shi'ism, it is not a very deep knowledge and very great knowledge, but the very few pieces of research and things that have been done here in Italy are the result of what converts have done, and they are very aligned with the political view of the Iranian state.
Okay, thanks very much.
Yeah, perhaps picking up from Minu's response, I could follow, especially like it was not your question, but I would like to start with just commenting on the mosque issue, because in Athens, first of all, and this responds a bit to your question, in Greece, you may know that there is a local Muslim population as well. Greece was very differently from other European countries, was part of the Ottoman Empire. And there are some mosques which have been there since like many centuries, especially in the northern eastern part of the country, in Thrace. but there is not a mosque in. There was not a mosque in the capital, in Athens. Now, like a few years ago, 2 years ago, but now we are in the COVID situation, there was the first mosque in Athens, which was to be inaugurated. And this is interesting because it was not designed as an exclusively Sunni or exclusively Shia mosque. There was a committee by 4 representatives of the different religious groups, and one of the representatives was the spokesman of the Pakistani Shia community as the spokesman of the Shias communities in general. So according to him, they would alternate, like this mosque would be used also for Shia ritual activities. But it, we still have to see how this will take place when the mosque will begin to be used. So regarding the question of identity, I also have to precise that especially the Pakistani Muslim population, that Shia Muslim population that I went in contact with, is a very fluctuating population. So they are mostly migrant workers coming, from Pakistan and leaving their families abroad, with their families back in Pakistan. And it's also a highly fluctuating population in the sense that most of them try to move to Northern Europe or stay some months to work in Greece and go back to Pakistan. So that's why they are predominantly male as well. So we have a very limited second generation migrants. The first migrants were during the 70s, but we have a very limited number of people that have been installed in Greece. So yeah, I can think about specific cases of second generation Shiites who speak perfectly Greek, and but it would not be sufficient to head towards a conclusion. What is interesting is how other, maybe this can be more useful for this discussion, how other Shia communities relate to the Pakistani Shia community, which is the most visible, because there is this question of visibility, especially in a country where Sunni Islam was so predominant, and Islam is always associated with Turkey and the Ottoman Empire, the previous dominator. In this sense, they get invisible as a minority within the minority. So yeah, in this case, the Pakistani Shia Muslim community is the most visible, especially due to the Ashura, but we have other communities I went in contact with, like the Afghan Shia community of the Hazara, and it's interesting to see how they relate to the Pakistani Shia community, or they are critical about several practices of the Pakistani Shia community, or in the last years they also co-perform their rituals at the same street during the 10th day. It's also interesting to see that having discussed mainly with Iranian people who are like Arezou Rezayan, like an anthropologist I'm in contact with, and others who are like who live in Greece since many years, when I go into this religious issue, there is a barrier that there are most people who are disassociated from religion, and this is partly what brings them to Greece, in a sense. Yeah, and you asked also this how they lead with local authorities, how they deal with local authorities. Yes, since 2004 they have a permission for performing this ritual outdoors in Piraeus, and since then they perform it. It's also interesting to see that in 2019, it was the first time where all the Shia communities in Greece, like Afghan, Pakistani, and some people from Iraq as well, except from like beyond the commemoration of the Ashura in Piraeus, they also performed a march in downtown Athens, in central Athens. So they acquired the permission. It seems that they did not fill the whole street, but only part of the street. And they marched from Omonia Square, like the main square in Athens, to Syntagma, in front of the parliament. And this is a particularly interesting point, because through this march, they wanted to put forward the message of the religion, and the universal message of Hussein about peace and about justice. And in this sense, they do not rely now on the practices so much. They want to disassociate the religion from the embodied practices and put forward a message that can be useful for humanity in general, not only, and it's not confined within the limits of a religion. This is specifically how the spokesman of the Shia, of the Pakistani Shia community, is very disassociated from the rest of the community. He's a middle class, second generation migrant who has now the Greek nationality. And discussing with him, he's several times, although he performs the Ashura as the other members of the community, he's also very critical to this idea of sacrifice, of embodiment, which is inherent to the Shia lament practices. And he wants more to put forward a more universal message that can be, more, that could, to cut a long story short, how we can think about Shi'ism beyond lament, beyond this embodiment. And in this, just to conclude, he also associates very much Christianity as a religion with Shi'ism, and especially Catholicism and Orthodoxy, underlying this idea of intersection that exists in both religions, like that we don't have God and the devotee and the population and the faithful, but you have all these intermediates, the apostles, the saints, or the imams, and he makes an association between the theological foundations of Christianity and Shia Islam, and not so much on the ritual embodiment.
Thank you. Thanks very much. It's very interesting. So, okay, if perhaps we do also have, I have another, this other couple of questions, but we also have one question in the chat. I would like to ask soon to be Dr. Mina Muazzeni, whether there were any reflections in the book Shia Study in the West on the quality of Western research on Shi'ism. I ask because in my experience, Western scholar contribution tend to have certain problems, and therefore I usually learn on Western scholarship on Shi'ism. That's an interesting question. Then I see Ahmed has his hand raised. So maybe we can also take Ahmed question. And
sorry, Diego, I think Riaz has to answer the question as, your question should be answered by Riaz as well.
Yes, of course. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And then I have another question. Sorry, I don't have an option of raising hand.
Thank you, Shireen. No, actually, yes, it's an interesting question that if the Yazidi feel more protected or if there are tolerance in the area. On the paper, yes, there are more tolerance and protection, but in the facts, not exactly, because after the liberation of the Sinjar, for example, and the area of homeland of Yazidi community, a lot of them still living in camps because of political conflicts between the Iraqi forces and not only Iraqi forces. Because to liberate the Sinjar cities, also Mosul in some way, a lot of forces shared the victory, such as like Iraqi army, Hasht forces, PDK forces, PUK forces, YPG forces, also local forces. So they have a political conflict between them to who will control the area, and this is can't take or bring tolerance or a stable situation in the area. So it's a liberated area, but not lived with the families or community yet. All of them, I mean, there are somebody moved to the cities, but there are a lot of them still living in the camps, and a lot of them left Iraq totally and went to Europe especially.
Oh, thanks very much. That's very interesting. So we have a couple of questions for Mina, and we also have Ahmed that is waiting. So perhaps if Mina wants to answer the question in the chat, or perhaps say a few things.
Sure. If you have my voice, you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can.
Can you? Okay. So in response to your question, yes, the authors repeatedly mentioned that the Shiite studies in the West provide an outside point of view. And because the Shiite community is a minority in the Islamic world, studies on this community must be conducted with careful considerations of what happens inside the community. And also, as I said, the authors emphasize on the fact that in the beginning and until the 20th century even, Shiite studies of Shi'ism was looked as viewed as a political conflict, not a religious sect mostly. And until the 20th centuries, the Shiite theology were not studied adequately. Also, the authors point out that and propose that because the quality and authenticity of Shiite studies is directly related to the sources that the authors use, and because the researchers in this area usually don't have access to the Islamic communities, this could be, their researches could be questionable. And they mostly admire the work of Donaldson, who, as I mentioned, lived in Iran for 16 years, and he lived in Mashhad, which is a very important Shiite community in Iran, and sort of inviting researchers to not like live in the community as long as Donaldson, but consider the researches and studies done by Shiite researchers in Iran, which have a domestic insight point of view. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, thanks very much. So Ahmed, thanks very much for your patience. And if you want to ask our question, please go on. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, yeah, a little bit of comments and questions. At first, I'm happy to see all friends here. Me and Ria studied together in Aleppo University. And yeah, I continued then in archaeology. Actually, I'm not expert in this argument. I would comment about the pictures in which they are in the places in Italy, and of the Muqallad, Sistani, Khamenei, Khomeini. As we know, the Sistani is like, it's against Wali al-Faqih. So there is like different currents between them. So they are the people who following this Muqallad are going in the same or making the same center, or there is centers for Sistani, for Khamenei, separated ones. This is for Mino. The second one about yeah, the presentation of Marius, it was very interesting. And I always thought that usually through the history of Shi'ism, as was opposite of the power, which is Sunni power, always adopted or probably contains some aspects of different religions, especially maybe Christianity. And as I see and sent link of YouTube in Italy, there is also tradition in south of Italy of flagellanti. It's very similar to Christianism, which I call them the Shia of Italy. But also there is Ashura. There is a community in Albania called Bagdashi. They also celebrate Ashura, but I don't know if they are Shia or Sunni or Sufi or Alawi. I think they are mix of all of this. At the end, I came up with this idea. So do you have some information about Bagdashi? And for Riyadh, as I saw also in Shangal, there is like mausoleum of Shia for Zainab or something related to Shia. I don't know if the town is mixed or only they have this mausoleum. For which reason, if you have information. And thank you again, and I'm so happy to see you here all. Thank you.
So I'm going to answer if your question is finished, because the first question was mine. Huh? Okay. You asked about the Maraja in the Pakistani community. It is a very good question, and I'm happy that you asked it. Actually, in Carpi, which is one of the first cities in Italy that hosted Shia communities, actually, we have the first Shia association registered in this city in 1996. A split happened in the Pakistani Shia community in this city as a result of the fact that one of these groups that was the first generation of Pakistanis tended to follow follow their Pakistani traditions, and as they told me in the interview, that they did not believe in the institution of Marja'iyya. And they were very keen of Julus and their Pakistani traditions, and they were not faithful to the fiqh or the what orthodoxy prescribe for the behavior of Shias, namely the rituals or the prayer, the fast and other religious practices, stricto sensu. And the other group, that was the younger group, the second generation of these Pakistanis. Interestingly enough, these young Pakistanis were more interested in Iran and the politics of Iran, foreign politics, and they were pro-Iran. And the photo that I showed, where you saw the photo of those three Maraja, was their Imam Barga. And they had put all these three photos, regardless of the position of this Maraja, Ayatollah Sistani, that you said rightly, that he is a critic of Wilayat al-Faqih. And they did not care about the critique of Ayatollah Sistani and the rivalry that actually exists between Ayatollah Sistani and Ayatollah Khamenei. And they had put all of them one beside the other in their Imam Barga. Whereas if you go to see the Imam Barga of the older generation, they do not have any photo of Maraja in their headquarters.
Yeah, thank you, Ahmed Fatima, for your question. Indeed, there is an Albanian, there used to be an Albanian community of Bektashis, which was also in the Greek territory. I don't know very much about them, but I do know that they have a syncretic religion which borrows many elements from Shi'ism and from Alevites, but they also borrow some Greek or Christian Orthodox elements, and they are like a mystical order, like Sufis, or they have orders. They have teke, like the Sufi monasteries and Babas, and there is a teke. If you're interested, I can send you the information, which is still present in Thessaly, in the middle of Greece, which is a Bektashi teke, and there is a connection. And some Albanians also visit this teke as a place of worship. So yeah, this is interesting that we have both a migrant new Islam, like from the last 2 decades of this recent migration, or 4 decades. The Pakistanis are the oldest ones, and but also we have an indigenous Islam, both Sunni in trace from Pomaks, or not Pomaks, from like more Sunni Muslims, and then we have Alevis Pomaks, in the south, like in the frontiers with Bulgaria, and also the Bektashi Albanians. So yeah, it's a mosaic of different trends, and there is some elements of Shi'ism, of course. Thank you. I can send you privately the information.
About the question about the mausoleum of the Zainab, the small Zainab they called it. Yes, actually there are a small mausoleum and ancient mausoleum of Zainab, because the majority of Sinjar are Yazidi, but there are also a little bit minority of Shia and Sunnis community. So it's a so small minority, but yes, it's mixed district of Sinjar.
Thank you.
Okay, Shireen has her hand raised.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I'm going to have two questions from Sherry, who is attending in our chat, and she's studying at American University Peace Studies. She told me she has some problems with the computer, so I'm asking from her these questions. The first question is for Riaz. Is the interface examples of Pope Francis visiting Iran can help Iraq to be more, Iraqi people to be more open about the concept of the relations between the Sunni and Shia leaders? And the second question, I think, is more general, if some of you can answer, is about the new communities of Shia people might be more amenable to fostering the relationships with the Sunni people. I think is relative to the Shia community in diaspora, maybe in Italy or in Greece or somewhere else. Are they, because to be a new community can be more open and have more relations with the Sunni community? Thank you.
Well, if the visit of Pope to Iraq was a step to good relationship between Shia and Sunni, I don't know exactly, because it's an ancient question and long conflict by the history. But I think it's a good step because we are going after a lot of wars. If we look to the history of Iraq in the last 40 years, we will see a lot of conflicts and wars and heavy wars in the area. And these wars bring disaster to all the communities, Sunni and Shia and other minorities. I think Iraq in a new phase and the communities should understand the necessity each other. And anyway, in the unified prayer of Pope in the Ur, there were about I think 8 community, most of all communities in Iraq, including Sunni, Shia, and Sabia, Yazidi, Christian no, because they have a special prayer in other places of Iraq. But all other community were present in the Ur prayer, and it could be a new phase and this new step for the dialogue between Sunni and Shia. But I think more of the prayer, they need political solution of how to govern the Iraq Republic. I think that's also so important to make the second step after the visit of the Pope.
Perhaps regarding the Shia-Sunni connections in the diaspora, in the migratory context of contemporary Greece, I would say that from what I have encountered during my field research, they try to foster these relationships between different communities. And for instance, they have organized several times what they call with the initiative of the Shia community, and especially due to the very, very active role of the Shia spokesman I mentioned before, they organized what they call interfaith meals. for instance, inviting people from different Muslim communities, but also from Christian communities to participate. Or on the same register, they have also organized like common celebrations of the birth of the Prophet Muhammad and the birth of Jesus Christ, in order to show that both Shia and Sunni Muslims can foster the relationships in between, as they are both very vulnerable minorities, especially during the last decade in an increasingly racist Greece, but also to foster the relationship with Christian communities and with other religions, the way of minoritarian religions in Greece.
I can answer you, Shirin, somehow with the case of Shias in Italy. As my observations tell me, Shias in Italy experience much more freedom comparing to their homeland, because thanks to the secularism that exists in Italy, even though it does not work 100% well, but somehow it resolves problems in terms of sectarian attacks and problems. For instance, one of my informants, while I was asking him about this informant was the guy who had launched the Who is Hussein campaign in 2014 in Italy. And he was a PhD, he was an Iranian PhD student at the time. And he said that he had done his master degree in Malaysia. And he said that in that context, in the majority Sunni context, he said it was not at all possible to launch such a campaign. Whereas in a Christian country like Italy, it is possible because it is more tolerance, because thanks to the secular system. And but the thing that I wanted to add is that in the case of outdoor rituals, namely the rituals that we have in the first 10 days of Muharram, we see more possibility for sectarian and for sarcastic attacks of Sunnis against Shias. And this type of attacks tend to be much less in the case of indoor rituals, even though sometimes very few Sunnis are present in the headquarters of Shias. I don't know if there isn't any other question. I will ask something of Marius. It was interesting, and I wanted to. I was curious, and I don't know. I'm not sure if I understood well. Do you have any bloody self-flagellation in Greece? Am I right? Because it is a very curious phenomenon. If you have it in Greece in public, I mean.
Thank you. This is what I would ask you as well regarding Italy. Yes, it is. They have the permission, and what South Asians like Pakistani Shia Muslims do, but just on the 10th day and just during like 30 minutes, it's self-flagellation with blades, so it is bloody. And they are doctors. They how do you call it? Treat the injuries afterwards. Of course, when I observed on the 19th, 2019, it was both Afghan Shias and Pakistani Shia. So you know perhaps that Hazaras, it's not bloody, it's just with chains and mostly with the clothes. So I think it's more close to Iran. But I would like to ask you if this happens in Italy, or if from your research you encountered it in other parts of Europe. I remember only Yafa Shanaik's, one article by Yafa Shanaik, if I'm correct, mentioning self-flagellation in some part in the UK, but I'm not completely certain about it. So yeah, please let me know.
Yeah, you are right. No, first of all, in Italy, we do not have such a phenomenon because it is not a lot. But in the UK, I know that because, you know, the presence of Shias is a very old phenomenon comparing to Southern Europe. So they are more familiar with the phenomenon, and it is a lot. But in Italy, it is not a lot. And I myself have read that they have in the UK self-flagellation.
Mm-hmm.
In Italy, they have
Yeah,
substituted,
yeah.
they have replaced it with the Who is Hussein campaign, which is a more peaceful and more dialogue-based type of mourning for Imam Hussein.
Yeah, this is what I was trying to explain before, that they are in this path as well in Greece. So I don't know till when they, speaking with the spokesman, he was like, my vision, at some point, there is no more like the practice of self-flagellation, we just have the campaign. But it's interesting also to discuss why this happens. And another point is that they also, they are devotees and pilgrims from other parts of Europe who come to Greece and who are not allowed in their countries to perform Ashura in this way. And they come to Greece because they are allowed to perform it in this way, like from the Netherlands, I think, and sometimes from Spain. But again, we should make a perhaps map what happens with the law, between what the law allows to do in every country, in every European country regarding the self-flagellation thing. Yeah.
Okay, is there any other question? Or in this case, I can thank very much our panelists. I learned enormously from you this afternoon, and I really thank you for your contribution. And perhaps Shirin wants to say something to wrap it up, maybe?
No, actually, I'm just going to thank everyone who they are also following this conference from this morning, our panelists from this morning, and also this afternoon. I would like just to give you some information about the videos. The videos after we are sending, we are putting and will be available in a website of OSMED, Observatory for Mediterranean, basically, which you already saw it in the program. And I put it in also in the chat, the link. And probably we are going to have a very a small dossier about the contributions of today's study and our panelists' contribution. This dossier also will be available soon, I hope, and will be also distributing. This is free through the website of OSMED and also the Facebook and Instagram of the observatory. So thanks a lot for your attending and also being with us and for your contribution, which is a very rich contribution. And I think I hope in the future to have more discussion and changing knowledge about this issue, about the Shi'ism, especially because we know it's not really very much worked on that. So that could be a very great work together. So I'm going to stop here my speech, and if also Minu wants to add something and tell something, or anyone else, thank you very much once again, and I hope see you in present and not online in the future.
Thank you everyone.
Thank you to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye.